by the Department of Defense for the Cross-Sector Cybersecurity Working Group on the EMP process. We also engaged with the doctors group to evaluate the impacts on the critical infrastructure and produced a report in November, recognizing the importance of not only the impacts on the electric grid, but the other critical infrastructures across our country. So we have been engaging across the board. The doctor has met with individuals from our infrastructure protection branch, so the comment about FEMA may have been miscommunications, but we have been engaged and engaging with his organization focusing on EMP.
And how much of your time would you say is spent on the issue of what we're talking about today, cybersecurity within your jurisdiction?
I have the luxury, if you will, to focus my entire time on control system cybersecurity. That's what my program was created to do. So in all of the Department of Homeland Security, my organization focused specifically on cybersecurity and physical security threats to industrial control systems.
And who do you report directly to?
I report to the director of the National Cybersecurity Division.
Which eventually, who reports to the secretary?
The Undersecretary for National Preparedness and Protection.
Is how far away from you?
2 steps removed. It's the director of the National Cybersecurity Division reports to the Assistant Secretary for Cybersecurity and Communications, who reports to the Undersecretary for NPPD, who reports to the Secretary.
So how often do you have an opportunity to report to the Undersecretary or Secretary, if at all?
I have briefed both the previous Undersecretary and Secretary, and I've had the opportunity to brief the current Deputy Undersecretary. I have not had an opportunity to brief the current Undersecretary Beers.
Okay. Did you have an opportunity to read the testimony of Dr. Gran and Mr. Fabro?
No, I did not have an opportunity prior to the
Do you have a copy of their testimony?
I do not.
Okay. I'll make sure that you personally get it. I would be curious for you to read both of their testimonies. Towards the end of Mr. Fabro, he gives several specific recommendations, and Mr. Graham, on page 5, he gives very specific recommendations. Would you be willing to read those?
Oh, absolutely, Congressman.
Okay.
Thank you.
Based upon what you heard so far today, is there anything that you would be in opposition to of what folks shared of things that we could do better?
I do want to emphasize the previous panel's comments on public-private partnership. I think that's a key element. And as was previously mentioned, regulation is just part of the equation. It's not the final solution. So there has to be an understanding and a collaborative effort between the private sector and the federal government to ensure that we address these issues. We often focus on the critical asset owners. We miss the responsibility and the opportunity of dealing with the vendor community. We actually have a subgroup in the Industrial Control Joint Working Group that focuses on the vendors and brings the vendors to the table so that we can incentivize the development of more secure products for the future. That was a key part in developing our procurement standards, which we've published in August of last year, identifying those steps necessary to develop and distribute and integrate more secure devices.
So do you reach out to traditional partners, the same ones you've always had, or what do you use to reach out to some others? Because unfortunately, the testimony today was not consistent with what you've said.
We are attempting to reach out. The Industrial Control System Joint Working Group is following on the efforts that were established by the Process Control Systems Forum. So we're maturing and growing that activity. And again, much of our focus in the past was on primarily the energy sector, specifically the electric sector. Unfortunately, we need to focus on all 18 critical infrastructures. So we've invested heavily in developing the partnerships with water, chemical, transportation, critical manufacturing across the board, because when it really comes down to it, these industrial control systems are pretty much the same across all these industries. The components that we use have the same vulnerabilities, whether it's moving the robotic arm that builds a car or generating power.
Okay, my last question, I've got 13 seconds, so if you could be brief in your reply.
Yes.
One of the things that stuck out to me was the procurement process, that we have many private enterprises that own many aspects of this whole area for us, and yet we're really not putting the things in place to ensure that they're doing the security aspect as well. Do you see improvements that could be made?
Absolutely. We can definitely improve that procurement process.
So could you provide those comments to this committee?
Yes, I can.
Thank you very much. I yield back. 15 seconds.
I now recognize the gentleman from Maryland, Mr. Bartlett, for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, and thank you again for convening this hearing. Mr. McClellan, I'd like you to help me clear up a definition problem. On page 2 of your testimony, written testimony, and on page 2 of Mr. Asante's written testimony, there are definitions of bulk power systems, and they seem to be different. You have a fairly restrictive one that exempts all local distribution facilities, including virtually all of the grid facilities in certain large cities. The definition in Mr. Asante's written testimony says, bulk power system is defined below, and he gives the section of the law, facilities and control systems necessary for operating an interconnected electric energy transmission network or any portion thereof, and electric energy from generation facilities needed to maintain transmission system facilities. So his would appear to include anything and everything, and yours would appear to exclude large portions of the system. Which one is correct?
The NERC definition for bulk power system is defined as generally 100 kV and above. It's actually bulk electric system. When EPAC 2005 was passed, it used a new term, bulk power system. The Commission, as you're probably aware, the Commission issues a notice of proposed rulemaking, collects comments, considers the comments, and then issues a final rule. This was a section or a definition that was heavily commented on.
Could you help us in getting, for your two agencies, a consistent definition so we know what we're dealing with? I'd appreciate that. Thank you very much. Yes. I want to make a brief comment about a comment that Dr. Graham made about a robust EMP attack bringing down the power grid, and it might be out for several months or a year or more, and some might wonder, how could that be? That's because if the grid comes down, it is very likely to take out large transformers. We don't make them. There are no spares. They're made somewhere overseas. If you order one, they'll deliver one in a year or 18 months or so. That's how long it takes to make them, which is why that observation. Mr. McClellan, don't you think this might have been a good place to use the stimulus money in hardening the grid? Wouldn't it make a lot of pretty good jobs?
It sounds like a good idea. But
thank you, sir. I agree. I agree. Okay, Ms. Hoffman, you mentioned that DOE does not have a program that would allow for private or publicly owned facilities to receive federal grants. What do we need to do to fix that? Can you fix it administratively, or does that need legislation to fix that? Because we certainly ought to be helpful, don't you think? How can it? Do we have to do something, or can you do it?
Within the department, we set our priorities, and there is no priority there is no activity at this time for that effort.
Well, I would hope after this hearing that there would be. I would hope. Mr. McGurk, you know, the smart grid is a great idea, but the reality is that the more effective we are in producing a smart grid, the less secure we are from an EMP attack, because that just increases our vulnerability. We really do need to do something about that. You mentioned the SCADA units. They're out there controlling all of this. Many of those components, nobody's around who made them. I have no idea where we'd get new ones. Mm-hmm. Some of those are really, really old. You mentioned national strategy to secure cyberspace. Sir, if Dr. Graham is correct and there is a robust EMP laydown, there will be no cyberspace to secure. Do you think he's wrong?
Oh, absolutely not, sir. Good.
Then I hope that we're doing something more than we're now doing, because I see us doing, you know, if it's 0 to 100, I see us doing something about 0.05 in terms of hardening our system. And Ms. Verlani, how is EMP incorporated among the factors for developing smart grid standards? Are you doing that? Is this new grid going to be hardened for EMP?
It's one of the areas that we have in our long list, and we are certainly taking it under consideration with our partners in DOE and FCC to understand where the standards needs might be.
Well, I hope that this gets higher priority than it has had, because as the testimony today indicated, we're enormously vulnerable here. And vulnerability encourages attack. And it doesn't have to be a state actor, it can be a non-state actor. I had a guy from the Department